a day after NewsClick founder and editor-in-chief Prabir Porkayas and the head of HR of his news portal were arrested after being booked under the stringent anti-terror law UAPA. They have been sent to 7 days of police custody. Facing ED heat, NewsClick released a statement alleging that it is being targeted by a series of actions by government agencies. They branded the crackdown unjustified and also said that they are not printing anything at the instance either of the Chinese government or Neville Roy Singham. In addition to this, 15 media organizations also wrote to the Chief Justice of India requesting that the judiciary intervene to end what they called increasingly repressive use of investigating agencies against the media. The letter says that probe agencies have been misused and weaponized against the press, and sedition and terrorism cases are being used only to harass and intimidate journalists. So, is this really picking out people who are damaging India's interests while staying within its boundaries, or a silencing of dissent? All right, joining us now on the show, we have Mr. Rajiv Malhotra, author of Snakes in the Ganga, and somebody who at length has spoken about how perhaps India needs to look within for some of its enemies. Mr. Malhotra, first up, what do you make of the arrests that have been made in the NewsClick case? Because in the latest, there is a letter that has been written to the Chief Justice saying that this is an ad hoc misuse of power by the centre against dissenting voices.
Well, you know, we've been tracking NewsClick for a long time. And in fact, we've written a summary of it in my book, Snakes in the Ganga. There's a summary on this particular person. And, you know, the culprit, a person called Neville Roy Singham. He is a Sri Lankan Cuban. One parent is Sri Lankan, one is Cuban. He's very close to the Chinese Communist Party. He is their conduit. He has started many projects in India. You know, he owns a company called ThoughtWorks India. It's a software house. And this company has created a project which is called People's Archive for Rural India, PARI. And PARI is being promoted and endorsed by Niti Aayog and a lot of people, even though we've written in this book about PARI. And see, this is an archive to crowdsourcing archive about rural India, villagers, Dalits, Muslims, minorities, encouraging their youth to tell their story of dissent and grievances against the nation state and against other Indians. So it's a very divisive kind of a thing, but done in the name of art and culture sort of thing. So it is a very well-disguised way of entering India, creating a huge database. Now, NewsClick is one of the subsidiaries of this particular person, and he is very closely aligned with the Chinese Communist Party. So in this book, we have a whole chapter on this, and the section on what I'm talking about starts on page 420. We have, in fact, a diagram showing how Communist Party and this particular gentleman are connected. They have a base in Harvard also, where there's an extreme left-wing component to this. So, you know, the ecosystem is very large. And once in a while, the authorities pick up one person here, one person there, and it looks very bizarre that you picked up somebody at random. I wish they would investigate the whole ecosystem and not just one person in isolation.
So let me start one by one, sir. Since you have yourself mentioned NewsClick in your book, what prompted you to take a closer look at a news website? Fairly innocuous.
So it's the Chinese funding. And the Chinese funding coming through a person who is associated with the Communist Party of China. He lives in China, has a base in the US also. So as we were looking at what are the latest Breaking India forces, the book I wrote, Breaking India, is 12 years, 13 years old, and it talked about Breaking India forces at that time. They are still around. But now there's a whole new generation of very sophisticated people, and these people are into capturing databases, news links, news stories, and they are part of an ecosystem. China has entered this ecosystem. Previously, it used to be Christian missionaries, and it used to be, you know, CIA and all that. But in the last 10 years, China has entered this ecosystem in a big way, made some very big investments. The investments in NewsClick is only a small part of a bigger footprint that they have in various countries, including India. So that we're looking at it as a as a global phenomenon from the Chinese Communist Party, and India and Brazil and some of these countries are major targets that they have.
But can there be any real linkages shown, especially a money trail? Because most people dismiss this as conspiracy theory. Oh, the familiar foreign hand is here. Earlier it used to be, the MI5. Now suddenly it's the George Soros and it's China. Can that really be established? Is there really any proof that there is actual collaboration or collusion?
Yeah, so the collaboration is at two levels, which we've pointed out and we've given references. One is the money trail. There's several tens of crores. It's not thousands of crores. It is tens of crores that have gone from overseas sources into NewsClick, and a lot even bigger in PARI. PARI stands for, once again, People's Archive of Rural India. That is a very massive project that people should look at. The Indian authorities should look at. So one is this money trail. These are is ideological trails, ideological training, and people who contribute to these news stories are then brought to places like Harvard and given a lot of importance, and then they are given legal support. The legal support in India, all these cases that they'll file, are also a global network. There's a global network of human rights people, human rights law. They look at activism of various kinds. And they are the ones who are supporting their people, because these are their people in India, and they will support them for sure.
Now let me read out to you what NewsClick said today after the arrest of two of its people. They have said our journalistic content is based on the highest standards of profession. We do not propagate Chinese propaganda on our website. We do not take directions from Neville Roy Singham regarding the content that is published on the website. So they're saying categorically, Neville Roy Singham is not telling us what to do, and there's no way to prove it.
Yeah, now this is I don't know. This is not an easy job to do, because they are extremely clever. I mean, they unless you got hold of all their emails and all their private conversations, I don't know what the law is on doing that and whether it's viable in India to do that. But unless people were really tracking their international travel and who are the people from foreign countries that visit them in India, you see, these people are extremely smart and they operate through a network of intermediaries. Singham, this Roy is a very clever fellow. The U.S. authorities have tracked, and New York Times has tracked, and we've been following this for a while, that he has more than 10 or 20 international kind of organizations that are non-profit, that have got very nice names, and the money flows in a very complicated way. So being able to uncover all this is not going to be easy, and that's the kind of job, I guess. I'm assuming that before they went and arrested these people, they must have proof. Otherwise, it would be foolish. Otherwise, it would be no different than, Trudeau making an allegation and not having any data. I mean, it's a foolish thing to first make an allegation and then go looking for data. You should know that when you arrest somebody like NewsClick, they are part of a global nexus. It is going to be big news all over, because they will protect their people. And so the Indian authorities better have, some evidence, and I'm sure they do. I would assume that.
You mentioned New York Times. That reminds me, a lot of people are also scoffing at, suddenly the Indian government has woken up to what NewsClick is doing thanks to New York Times, which otherwise they poo-poo as, somebody who is anti-India. It's also important to underline that New York Times is not the first one to be talking about either Neville Roy Singham or NewsClick and others.
Yeah, well, I would say our book came out over a year ago, and we have 6 pages on these guys. We have named them, and we have a dozen endnotes and references with links to other sources. So if somebody were to read out these 6 pages, starting in page 420 onwards, we have a diagram showing the flowchart of how this is happening. And so if you were to just look at this, we also have a whole chapter 8 on the China's role in creating misinformation, disinformation, all of that worldwide. We have a whole chapter on that. So, we've been at it for many, many years. I mean, I'm glad New York Times picked it up, and therefore the Indian government takes it seriously. But I wish they had read our book and taken it seriously also.
Finally, I want to ask you, there is a lot of worries in the country about the use of UAPA, because it's the first time, at least in recent memory, that an anti-terror law has been invoked against a news portal. Is this excessive?
Well, I think the definition of terror has to see where does free speech end and hate speech begin? And what are the laws? When does it become a call for terror? I mean, after all, the United States went after a whole lot of bin Laden and all these kind of people because they were speaking against the United States and inciting terror. I mean, some of the people did not push a gun themselves. They did not blow up somebody. They did not do a bomb on their own. But they were talking against the United States, and they were asking others to do this kind of work, and they were encouraging, they were legitimizing the use of use of anti-Americanism.
No, but I'm sorry, but is it fair to compare a bin Laden? I mean, ultimately, he was the planner and executor of 9/11. He actively participated in the training, indoctrination of the people who ultimately blew up the World Trade Towers. But there is a news portal.
Fair enough. No, fair enough. But the Islamic groups also have news portals that have been shut down. I mean, there is a money laundering trail. The United States passed this money laundering law in the guise of fighting, the drug cartels. But actually, the biggest use of money laundering laws in recent years has been to track down people who have any relationship with anti-Americanism, and they get flagged. So the ideological flagging, which is not directly related to violence, but kind of indirectly promoting it, is considered within the scope of these laws. So India has to figure out what are the laws and what do the laws allow, or how much latitude does the government have to go after somebody who has not dropped a bomb anywhere and not openly asked people to do so, but who is certainly on the side of those who want to dismantle the established order. Is that free speech? Is it democracy, or is it going too far? I think that's the debate that the Indian people have to have, and Supreme Court has to adjudicate that.
Well, and it's happening robustly now. If indeed there are snakes in the Ganga, they must be identified and acted against, but it also must withstand the scrutiny of law. Mr. Rajiv Malhotra,
I fully agree. Yes.
Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.
To us your perspective.